Welcome to another episode of the Palace Huddle Podcast. Here are your hosts, Rob Schwartz and Justin Onayemi, two Bears fans who decided talking into a microphone was better than shouting at their television.
Welcome in, Palace Huddlers. Huddle up! It's been a while, but as always, it's Rob Schwartz, joined with me, my good buddy and co-host, Justin Onayemi.
Good to be here, man.
Yeah.
Post-draft.
We had a fun 4 weeks leading up to this draft.
Absolutely. Now I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much build-up and lead-up to it, and then it came and it went.
Now we have post-draft coverage, and then it's going to be like crickets.
Right. For a little while.
Yeah.
So we'll try to find content to present, and I know I'm giving away something already, but the Bears still have some work to do on the roster.
They do. And we mentioned it in a text message back and forth during the draft, or maybe right before the draft, but my guess is the Aaron Rodgers news means the Chicago Bears will probably not be on Hard Knocks.
Yeah, I mean, locally, obviously, we know tons of storylines that, they could use, but number one, they didn't actually use the number one pick.
Right.
And then you have Rodgers going to the Jets, which was one of the 4 teams that most likely will need to do it, basically. I don't know exactly how to phrase that.
Yes.
Any other team could volunteer, maybe, or not any team.
Not any team, right? But yeah, those are the 4 teams that
don't have a choice.
Met the requirements, yes, of not saying no. And as we know, the Chicago Bears are going to go out of their way to say no.
Exactly.
Unless they're forced. Right?
And they still probably have some pull, I would say, as just long-time owners and things like that. So.
Probably. And maybe the Jets want it.
Maybe they want all that attention. I mean, they're going to get the attention no matter what.
Right.
So anyway, Bears podcast. We're here.
Yeah. So this is episode 43.
43.
I had no idea. Could not think of a guy off the top of my head.
So someone popped in my head, but then I wasn't so confident, so I had to look it up. And then when I looked it up, it didn't totally ring a bell, and then it got back in my head. Anyway, Mike Green. Safety, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s. And I think at one point played alongside Mike Brown. So you had Mike Brown and Mike Green, I believe, as your 2 safeties.
So I was at a draft party on Thursday, and I'm dubbing this episode the Doink 2 episode. There was a guy at this party who had the number 43 jersey for the 43-yard field goal, and it said Doink 2, Roman numeral 2 on the back.
Wow.
One of the best jerseys I think I've ever seen.
Well, sad as well.
It's very sad. His comment to me was, "You got to own it."
That's true.
So,
unless someday someone triple doinks in a huge situation, then that one's pretty much going to live on forever.
Yeah. Well, we had an NFL draft. We had 3 days of coverage. You and I decided we were going to look at the draft after words and just kind of attack it all at once. We are going to break this into 2 parts. We're going to look at day 1 and day 2, and then we're going to look at day 3.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about day 3, a lot of what we're also going to be doing is just talking big picture, the whole thing encapsulated together. So, yeah, I'm very excited. I think if we had done it, released episodes as we were going, maybe our takes would even be a little different. But it's nice to get the whole picture.
I've had a little bit of time to calm down. I still have a Rob's rant.
In part 2.
It's not going to be as heated as some of my other ones, but it's going to be, I think it'll be all right.
All right. So, as we said, this is our Mike Green episode.
By the way, I'm going to be producing because, we can't afford a producer. So I'm going to be producing at the same time. There could be some hiccups along the way. Please bear with us as we have some visuals, videos, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, but that's what the people like. So
that's right.
It'll be good.
All right. Let's dive in.
All right. So I think the first thing I want to just point out to everybody is who they got, because there was, I mean, we're going to focus on day 1 and day 2 in terms of breaking it down and analyzing. But if you could go a slide further.
Yeah. So real quick, as we go into this, I think you're going to quickly see there's 10 picks, right? Now, technically they started with 9 if you count prior to the Panthers trade, right? Okay. They got an extra pick, the 61st pick overall in the second round, right? then, so they went from 9 to 10 right before the draft basically started, right? No, a few month and a half before the draft started. They didn't gain any picks. They still finished with 10.
10's a
lot. Last
lot.
year, they went from 6 to 11.
Yeah, but 10's a lot.
It is. But I was kind of projecting, I think I projected 13 when I was guessing how many we would end up with. But there's a big difference here. And I'll point it out really quick before you talk about what you want to talk about. There's 4 picks in the top 75. Okay. Last year, there were 5 out of those 10 picks. 5 out of those 11 picks, I'm sorry. We're in the 200s. Okay. So we have 4 in the top 75. And if my math is correct, 8 before we even hit 200. It's a huge difference this year compared to last year, even though the quantity is 1 less.
I totally understand what you mean. And something I'm going to speak to later is just how Ryan Poles is building this team. And it goes exactly with what you're saying. In addition to gaining the pick, like you said, in that trade of the number 1 to number 9, they gained future picks in 2024, in 2025. And so I think you said last year, coming in with 6, leaving with 11. This year, coming in with 9, leaving with 10. I think we're going to get used to double-digit picks year after year after year, so you can replenish your roster. And there might be some holes people don't feel he filled, but
this is
we'll
very
talk about that.
Different than the Ryan Pace era when it was like, what?
4 picks
maybe a max of 7, right?
Yeah.
And it was like more like 5. Crazy.
I like this a whole lot better. So we're going to just go quickly through. As you look there, if you see an asterisk next to a number, it just means that pick somehow was involved in a trade. And I probably wouldn't have put an asterisk if they picked at 9, even though technically that involved a trade as well.
Right.
But the reason for the asterisk there, they were supposed to pick 9. We'll go into detail on that. And pick 10, Darnell Wright, offensive tackle out of Tennessee. That was the only day 1 pick the Bears were involved in. I was by the TV wondering if they might trade back in.
Same.
But that was the only day 1 pick. On day 2, they had 2 second-rounders and a 3rd-rounder. Pick 53, Gervin Dexter Sr., defensive tackle out of Florida. Pick 56, which they weren't supposed to take, they traded up to get Tyreek Stevenson, a corner out of Miami.
That was originally pick 61.
That would have been pick 61. And then pick 64, first pick of the 3rd round, Zach Pickens, DT out of South Carolina.
Oh, it's back up too. And I believe they gave up pick 136 in that to trade up to 56. Did.
Now, they then recouped a pick by trading out of the first pick of the 4th.
Yes.
So you want to take us through day 3?
Yeah, so day 3, they were the first pick on the draft, right? And it was supposed to start at 11 o'clock Central Time, I believe. And around 10:30, we got a notification that they were trading out of that pick. It was something I kind of thought that they would do. They moved down to pick 115. The Saints moved up, drafted an offensive lineman, and
interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, I can't even recall who it was. Not anyone I was highly on. But they recouped the pick for 165 by making that move. So again, that put us right back at 10. Round 4, sticking in round 4, the pick they originally had, 133, they got Tyler Scott.
I don't know if you mentioned who they ended up taking at 115.
I did not. I'm sorry. 115, they took Roschon Johnson, the backup running back to Bijan.
I was going to say, I hope he's not so easily skipped. I hope he's an impact player, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. So Roschon Johnson, running back out of Texas, he was the backup to Bijan. Definitely a different playing style to Bijan, but did pretty well there. Tyler Scott was the receiver they took in round 4. A lot of these guys that I'm going down now, and we'll talk about it, are kind of best player available, right? Noah Sewell, the brother of, was it the Lions who got Sewell?
Yes.
Yeah, the Lions got Sewell. He's a linebacker out of Oregon, which, again, not really in need. Then they went with Terrell Smith, corner out of Minnesota at 165. And then in the 7th round, they grabbed Travis Bell, a guy that even ESPN ignored because they had no highlight tape on.
Well, and I think I heard Kennesaw State, where he went. He's the first player to ever come out of that school.
Yeah, the Owls.
Now, that must be where Justin Fields grew up, right?
Maybe.
Because I know he's from Kennesaw. I'm assuming that's in Atlanta.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It is. And then pick 7. The pick before Mr. Irrelevant.
That's right.
Right? Which
no cool nickname.
Ended up being a defensive lineman that I wasn't familiar with. But Chicago took a safety / corner, because we'll get to that at some point later too. At pick 258, Kendall Williamson out of Stanford.
All right, you want to go full screen for a second?
Yeah, let's bring our beautiful faces back for you guys
Give
to
the
enjoy.
People what they want to see.
Right.
Although I was thinking about shaving before this.
Yeah, I was just saying you're not clean shaven.
I was too tired. You know, man, I was just locked up doing draft coverage. Didn't leave the house for 72. I'm joking. I was just too lazy to shave. But so we're going to talk about a whole lot. But I think what we really, really first want to start with, and had we broken this down, like we said, I'm sure we would have had all sorts of things to talk about.
Yes.
Just breaking down day one.
Yep.
So.
Are we ready?
Yeah, I think we're ready.
All right.
You want to advance it first? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're going to be a great producer, man. I can tell already. There's going to be awards to be won. So I think if we're going to analyze day one, we really have to talk about it as pass, trade, pick. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah. So we're going to passed
up on somebody.
Who a lot of fans are very upset about.
Yep.
In Jalen Carter. And they traded number 9.
Mm-hmm. All the way down.
Whew.
All the way down.
Way down.
They fell.
Like the down under.
Yeah. They fell from 9 to 10.
To 10. So what did they do? They decided they weren't going to take Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm going to trust Ryan Poles. I've been saying that from the beginning. I have not met with Jalen Carter. I have no idea who he is as a character, right? Outside of what I hear in the media.
Right.
Or hear from his agent, right?
Of course.
So I'm going to trust Ryan Poles. I'm going to trust that process. They met with him on multiple occasions. They made the decision they weren't going to take him. They got a free 2024 4th-round pick, and I saw people mad about it.
Some people's reactions were so dumb.
Like, one of them was, why do you take the risk of not getting the player you want? Clearly, and Ryan Poles said this in his press conference, they knew the Eagles were going to take Jalen Carter.
Or, hear me out, there were at least 2 people they would take at 10.
Sure.
I mean, you can't go into this draft like, oh, there's only one guy I want at 9.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't trade the number 1, and you don't have DJ Moore, and you don't have a future 2024 and a future 2025.
Exactly.
So here's the thing, and I'm going to take it even further than where you went. Okay. Not only do we not know Jalen Carter, we don't know any of these people.
Correct.
We don't know any of them. You and I, we look at their statistics, we see what they did in the combine, but we're not at these interviews. We're not in the more in-depth ways that they learn not just about character flaws and effort, but how that person might fit with their system. And to act like the Bears were the only team that had worries about Jalen Carter.
Seattle passed on him.
Could have gone at 5 to Seattle. Perfect fit. And they have Pete Carroll.
Yep.
Who's a guy that you would probably has a track record to say, no, I can work with. Do the Bears have that with Eberflus? And this roster, they don't have that.
No.
Seattle passed on him. Lions could have used him.
Yep.
They passed on him. And that's a culture team.
Yeah.
They pride themselves on, we do things
another defensive-minded coach.
So, team after team after team. Now, granted, all the talk before the draft is at 9 is about where it would end, and it would go to the Bears. That talk before the stuff, that's always all over the place.
Correct.
Ask Will Levis about the talk before the draft.
Correct.
Although I heard more about that, but not for this show.
So a lot of people are like, well, Howie Rossman's like a top GM. I'll admit, he is one of the best GMs out there, right? But they have a team that's set up to take a player like that, and even if he fails, they'll be okay.
They can absorb that risk.
Right. Chicago has so many holes. Yes, if he hits and he is amazing, sure, it could turn the team around. But do you take that risk if you're Ryan Poles? Or do you pick is the word you used, an offensive tackle who you can plug and play on the right side and give Justin Fields the protection he needs?
A huge need for this team.
Yes.
Just like 3-tech is a huge need. Now, some people said they didn't get enough back. For what?
Right.
It's a freebie.
It was.
Because honestly, Philly, as time went down and the Bears had to make that pick, probably should have had a reading on the fact that the Bears didn't want Jalen Carter and shouldn't have offered anything.
Right.
And just taken him once the Bears took anyone else. So the fact that you got anything was fine. Okay, you want more than that? You want a second-round pick? Well, guess what? The only way you're getting that is if you trade further back, maybe to 17 to the Steelers.
Yeah.
They were an aggressive team in the draft. They had a really nice draft. So let's say they decided, and they have Tomlin and the culture. Let's say they wanted Carter. You go back to 17, maybe you get a second-rounder, but you probably don't end up with Darnell Wright.
No.
who they were very, very high on.
But they did get a player I would have been very happy with.
Who's that?
Broderick Jones.
Well, okay. Now, here's the thing. It takes 2 teams to make that trade, though.
That's right.
And so maybe even Pittsburgh didn't want to talk about him, or not at that,
right.
or not by giving up assets.
Offering enough. Or, as we've heard, or it's been rumored, hinted, Chicago had Darnell Wright as their number 2 offensive tackle on the board. So they didn't want to take the risk of going to 17 and missing out.
And I hate to bring it up because I don't know that this should factor in, but they're slotting him at right because they like Braxton Jones at left.
Yes.
A lot of the other guys were more so touted as lefts, which you hope can switch over. But I just think switching is not as easy as everyone acts like it is.
It's not, but he does, they do think he could do it.
I think they liked him better than most. I heard maybe even better than Paris Johnson, who was gone by 6, so he wasn't even
even a factor. Arizona traded down from 3 to 6 and ended up getting him. Or I'm sorry, traded down. They traded down to 7
to 12.
12.
They traded with
Houston. That's right, 2 and 3. Houston. And then they traded back up from 12 to 6 with the Lions, and ended up getting Paris Johnson. My number 1 offensive tackle on the board, and from what I've heard, was their number 1 tackle.
I think so too. So, you had been on record here kind of not wanting them to go Darnell Wright. And I do defer often to your knowledge because I know you put in the time to really look at these prospects. But the more I hear, the more I see, I'm starting to really like that pick. Huge man, huge size, but still quick enough, it seems, to anchor the right tackle. And in pass protection, which is not an area that the Bears have thrived, I now feel pretty good about what you have at right tackle. And you start to look at the 5. They say they want to play the best 5. If we project who we think that might be, it's a heck of a lot better than what they were putting out there last season.
Yeah, so I think I've made it pretty clear that I, on many occasions, felt like Darnell Wright was not the fit for this offense. I took the approach that this offense was going to continue to run an outside zone running scheme, and Paris Johnson does not move well laterally for me.
Darnell Wright.
I'm sorry. Darnell Wright. I wish it was Paris Johnson. Darnell Wright does not move laterally enough for me to consider him someone who would succeed in the outside zone running. Okay. Tennessee, they kind of ran an outside zone. Okay. So it's not that he's not familiar with the type of system. Like you say, he's a bigger guy, right? He's 333 pounds. Could he cut some weight? Sure. But like Paris Johnson's like 315. Broderick Jones is 310. It's a lot easier to move. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have good footwork. Mm-hmm. And I've also mentioned that I thought he was the best pass blocker out of all of them. I just felt that the upside, also looking at them as left tackles, the upside of Paris Johnson, the upside of Broderick Jones was higher to me than the upside of Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright's still a plug-and-play offensive tackle.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give away a little bit of a take I want to delve further into in more detail later. But you can tell by the way the Bears drafted in this particular draft that they believe in their coaches, that they're going to get guys who fit a certain trait, a certain skill, and then not even a skill necessarily, traits and characteristics. And if they have the effort, have the coachability, which that was one thing we are not privy to in their meetings with Darnell Wright, but apparently they loved. I think they believe they're going to coach these guys into the system they want to run get the best out of them.
It sounds like Chris Morgan and Ryan Poles, and I'm assuming Matt Eberflus was there as well, put Darnell Wright through the ringer, and they loved what they saw, right? Now, he's somebody that also played in the Senior Bowl. So they got an up-close look at him. This is also something we're going to see throughout a lot of these draft picks. There's quite a few that were on the American team with Luke Getsy at the Senior Bowl. So they got an up-close look at these guys.
I believe he won, practice player of the week.
Yeah, something along those lines.
So that's what you want to see. And they were lucky enough to be the coaching staff that got to see that up close by having the worst record in the league.
Now, I'm going to throw up some video here. This is not our video. This is video that is actually owned by John Boy Media Football, or also JM Football. Okay, I don't own the rights to this, but it's a YouTube video. And this is actually plays of Darnell Wright versus Will Anderson, okay, the top prospect, in my opinion, in this draft class. Okay. Now, something that I want to point out right away. Sorry, it's not the right play. Here we go. Okay, so the anchor is there. The ability to absorb him is there. One thing you can kind of notice is I don't like his hand placement here. It's a little bit too much on the outside. He kind of is a bear hugger at times. I'm a little concerned at the NFL level. He's going to
draw flags,
draw some holding penalties. It's something he's going to have to work on right there with, as they call Chris Morgan, SEMO, apparently.
But is that something you coach out of somebody?
I think it is. These guys are going to go down here in just a second, and that's this next play that I really want to show. Okay, his footwork on this play is fantastic. He's got this amazing kick step, quickly gets his feet out. And if you recall watching the Paris Johnson video where he's, this is basically what he's doing. Okay. But this is live against Will Anderson. Okay. Absorbs him, is able to just anchor down. He's got some bend.
So something I heard after the fact, when you're really diving in, now that you're like, oh, this guy's going to be a bear. Will Anderson, when asked who's the toughest offensive lineman he went up against, said It was Darnell Wright.
Yes.
So what better compliment than that? You got the guy who, double-digit sacked, two-time SEC defensive player and SEC defensive player of the year. That really means something.
Yes.
Says this is the hardest guy he had to go against.
Yep.
So things like that, I speak well to the pick. And I don't know. I just feel it's not for me to judge with a fine-tooth comb how these players end up until later when we see them actually perform. So to give like a very specific grade, I think they go after their traits. They go after players they like. And I do think this is a good pick for the Bears.
Yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not against it. I probably would have preferred Broderick Jones personally, just because I felt like the upside was there. He could play left tackle, but I'm on board with it. You got a guy who you're clearly saying you want Justin Fields to be able to pass the ball. That's the guy you put there.
There you go.
End of story. I don't think there's anything else for me left to say about it.
That's it. So that was day one. And like we said, that happened pretty early. Lots of stuff was going on in the draft throughout, and there were lots of trades.
Yes.
So we didn't know if the Bears would trade up. We were even debating, should they?
Right.
They did not. So that was it for day one.
On to day two.
So I'll give a quick overview and then we dive in.
Yeah.
So they ended up with 3 picks on day 2, 2 second-rounders and the first pick of the third round. And I would say, maybe surprisingly, 2 of those players had, play very similar positions. Whether you they're both defensive tackles. Now, whether they're 3 techniques, 1 technique, some form of a hybrid, we'll talk about that. But the first one was Gervin Dexter Sr. out of Florida at 53. Then we talked about how they traded up, which was kind of interesting, and it made us think, who could they be trading up for? At that time, we thought maybe was it for a center?
Right.
And it was not for who we thought it would be.
No.
At least I'll say I didn't think. It was for a corner. It was for Tyreek Stevenson. They did end up giving up some picks later and then recouping those again in a different trade.
Yep.
And then final pick of day 2 was Zach Pickens out of South Carolina.
Pickens.
I'm guessing it's short for Zacchaeus or something like that.
Maybe.
But yeah, don't leave out that second C. But
that's not a typo.
That's not a typo. Thank you. Zach Pickens at 64 out of South Carolina. Another really massive human.
Yes.
Who plays inside defensive line. So I think our instant reaction, we were a little confused. Why 2 interior defensive linemen? Didn't address edge here, and it turns out didn't address edge at all. We'll get into that.
Yeah, I'll be working on an article actually for Bear Eagles on where I'm going to go through and put who I believe Ryan Poles should have drafted at the picks that they picked at.
Okay.
That includes them trading up, right? But like who I thought was there on the board and I thought they should have taken. A little spoiler, I would have preferred going Thule, who went the very next pick after Gervin Dexter.
Yep.
And then you get Zach Pickens later. Or if you really wanted Dexter, you go Dexter there. You take Zach Harrison later. Then you got, your 3 technique, and you got a defensive end. But Ryan Poles has spoken to financially, which makes me feel maybe they thought the second tier market, the second wave of free agency, looked better or good enough that they can add some veteran help there. Maybe it's Yannick Ngakoue. Maybe it's a Frank Clark. There's some rumors that Carl Lawson might be getting cut from the Jets.
Yeah.
So
the Bears, and we're going a little bit off the draft, but it's all tied together.
It is.
They had the most free agent money coming into this by a landslide.
Yes.
And that could have meant they were just throwing money at people like crazy. That's not what they did.
Nope.
They had some big contracts, but that's not what they did. They still are close to the floor of what they need to spend.
Yeah.
So there's still money to be spent. And I think one thing I can say is that we don't know the public draft boards or even draft boards you and I could create how closely or how far off it was from what the Bears were looking at.
Right.
And so again, and let's, Jalen Carter's the big example. There may be reasons we have no way to know of why they didn't want certain guys or didn't think at that particular value was the place to take them. But I think they didn't come in saying we're going to address all the needs we have through this draft.
Yes.
I'll give you another example. Centers, your big 3 who we thought were, could play right away. Tippmann, Schmitz, and Weipler. Is it Whippler?
I call him Luke Whippler.
Okay. Well, he ended up going in the hundreds.
Yes.
Okay. He fell way down.
5th round, I think.
Yeah, he fell way down.
Yeah.
And so for all we know,
your boy Juice Scruggs went earlier.
I know Juice Scruggs. He went very early in the 70s, I want to say, but it tells you that they might not have seen them that way at all.
Right.
And they drafted a center last year out of Illinois, Kramer, or was he undrafted?
No, he was.
Okay, he was one of those late
6th round pick.
One of those later picks they acquired.
Correct.
They signed Lucas Patrick last year. He didn't perform all that great, but there was some injury stuff there. They now have done some things at guard that makes you think Whitehair might move in.
I mean,
they might have felt fine at center for next year and maybe the year after, or they've acquired all these picks for next year. They're probably already looking at prospects of next year and who they like.
Here's how I see their offensive line, just real quick. Braxton Jones at left tackle, and they're either going to move Tevin Jenkins to left guard, okay, which there's rumors of that. He's already kind of hinted at that.
Yep.
Cody Whitehair is going to move to center. You got Nate Davis at right guard, and now you got Darnell Wright at right tackle.
I like that line.
Worst case scenario, they don't feel Tevin Jenkins can do it based on his health. They keep Cody Whitehair at left guard. Lucas Patrick plays center with Doug Kramer as the backup. He had a Liz Frank injury real early in the year. He should be 100% by training camp.
Yep.
And then you have, the other 2 on the right side stays the same.
So here we are as, analysts or fans and saying, oh, you got to get one of those 3 centers if you want to plug some guy in. Maybe they don't want to plug a guy in. Maybe the third one that we were talking about, no one in any of the teams didn't pick until the hundreds.
Right.
And so I think we get fixated on our list and really thinking this is where you got to get this guy when they might not have had that guy in their thoughts at all. And I'm not saying the same thing is true about end because that was a really deep position and a very glaring need.
Yes.
But neither of those positions did get filled in the draft.
Yeah, so let's just quickly go through these guys. Gervon Dexter, right? 6'6", 310 pounds. He's got a RAS score of 9.3, a 31-inch vertical. For me, he was my defensive tackle number 7 going into the draft. Some of the things that we can note, and I'm going to throw up some video while I just talk to it. Nothing here that I'm going to really speak to specifically. I'm going to try.
Can I say something about the RAS score real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and that'll give you time to shuffle things around, producer. So when you see his RAS score, which is through the roof, a pretty amazing score, immediately on Twitter and things like that, you see compared to Forrest Buckner.
Yes.
Well, let's not put all this pressure on people to be Pro Bowl, all-pro players, kind of like they did with Cansey, and immediately say, oh, do you happen to know he's a lot like Aaron Donald? I would love to see an RAS score next to some Pro Bowl, all-pro, and then find another guy who had that similar RAS score who, works at Jewel now and never even made the team.
Right.
But he's a very incredible athlete.
Okay, so just real quick, this is California Highlights is the one who created this video. It's with California with a K. So if you want to look this up, you can go watch the whole entire thing. But again, I'm just going to kind of let it play while I speak to what I have here from my notes. So he kind of looks slow off the snap at times, but we recently found out from Ryan Poles that he was asked to read and mirror a lot in Florida, which means he's going to have a little bit more of a squared up stance. He's not able to just put his toes into the dirt and then just hit those gaps. Here, playing the 3-tech, he's going to be just basically going to that, gap and trying to get in there and be a disruptor. He was, I'm going to pause this real quick. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was the #1 5-star recruit, ahead of Jalen Carter,
yes,
and Brian Breesy.
Yes.
2 guys that went very early. Okay. There's no reason to think that he can't do what he was doing in high school at this level. Okay.
Was he one of the guys? I think I heard this story about 3, 4, 5. I heard about multiple prospects that ended up getting drafted that they came to football late, like didn't play until their junior year of high school.
That I can't speak to.
I thought he was one of those guys, and
it could be.
I mean,
but I also need to point out
it's a violent sport, so
there's a difference playing on the Florida defensive line than there is playing on the Georgia defensive line, right? So, had he been where Jalen Carter was, maybe he was going to look this way, right?
Well, we talked about that going into the pros. It's the same thing going into college.
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Carter may have a Pro Bowl or even Hall of Fame career, but that doesn't mean if you put him on the Bears, he'd have the same success.
Right.
So great point to make there.
Now we're going to see some highlights here against Alabama. If I fast forward here, and you're going to see some of the closing speed that he has. If I can get to it. Come on. Maybe I got the wrong video. I must have the wrong video. But anyway, there was some closing speed that he had even against Bryce Young. Didn't get the sack, but still got there, disrupted it, caused horrible incompletion. He has great closing speed. He's strong and powerful. He's going to need to develop some counter moves. But the one thing is that I saw was that there was reports of him having a bad motor. I have now kind of heard that that's not the case necessarily. And had I had that in my mindset that I took him off the board for Chicago because of the hits principles, but had I known, or had I taken him off, not taken him off, he would have been my 5th defensive tackle.
Okay. Now that last clip that just showed, you don't have to go back.
Okay.
I just want to point out something. You brought up sacks, and I think sometimes we look at the numbers and either misuse them, and maybe it's intentional. Sometimes I think it's oversight, but sacks isn't a critical. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not critical. It's not necessarily a telling sack for an interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
That last play right there, he didn't get the sack, but he hit that quarterback right as he was throwing it, leading to an interception.
Yeah. And
I think as long as he can generate pressure up the middle, we talked about how important that is. I don't care if he gets the sack or not. That's a disruptive aspect that can help all other layers of your defense.
It is. All right. I'm going to go ahead and speak to Tyreek Stevenson. Here's a guy I actually had unranked. Okay. He was not in my rankings. Now, it's not that I didn't rank him, like he didn't qualify or anything like that. I only got through 10 corners, and he was not in my top 10. After watching him, I probably should have had him somewhere in that top 10. Especially now knowing what Ryan Poles is looking for. Long, lengthy corner, right? He's 6 foot, 198 pounds, almost 200 pounds.
And long arms, I believe.
I don't have his arms in front of me. But he ran a 4.45 40. He had a 38.5-inch vertical. Again, with the RAS score, is 8.93. When we say these RAS scores, anything over an 8 is considered elite from athleticism standpoint. So again, both elite. He is going to be an outside corner, I think, for them. But as I say that, he also could play the slot if needed because he does have experience with it.
Where is this video from?
This video, if I can get it up.
Does anyone know how to post videos to Facebook?
All right. So this video is from ACC Digital Network. You can check out the whole thing there. Again, so just some things on him that I have here. A 47.2 completion percentage when targeted over the last 2 years. It was 57.7 over his total 3-year career. He does only have 3 interceptions over those 3 years. However, 2 of those came last year with 9 pass deflections. It was his best season by far. He does have some punt return ability, but I wouldn't count on him for that. He definitely fits the violence mold, though. I mean, this guy's a big hitter.
Yeah, he comes up and makes tackles.
Yeah, big hitter. He will miss at times. I think mainly because he tries to get that big hit.
That's what Brisker's for.
But you kind of reminds me of Brisker the way that he tackles, right? He's a smart corner. He reads plays well. He's going to be best in press man because he does have some height, some hip tightness that I see that doesn't allow him to keep with, like an elite route runner, someone who's going to kind of get him off the edge and like cut him back, and he's going to end up getting a little bit beat that way. But he does have the closing speed to come back. So I think he's probably going to be your starting corner. There's one of those hits. I think he's going to be one of those starting corner opposite of Jalen Johnson,
which will allow Kyler Gordon to move inside and just focus on that.
Yes.
Now that's just us saying that, and I'm sure there's going to be times where that's not the case, and maybe you'll see Kyler Gordon on the outside. But it's going to allow them some flexibility and versatility, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah.
And I already feel the defensive backfield was one of the strengths on their defense last year, although I don't know that they were competing with much since they had a historically bad defensive line.
Right.
Which is why, well, we'll get to that next. I don't mind them putting a lot of investment into that position, or into that unit, I should say.
So I was one of those people, and Bob and Justin and I, as always, we were texting back and forth, and I was pissed that it was another defensive tackle. I was very high on Zach Harrison, and I would have loved to see him in Chicago.
Wait, I got to interrupt you. Oh, no, go. Sorry.
Okay. Who went not too much longer after this. But looking back at the whole entire draft, I can understand why they went here, because defensive ends went real early. Defensive tackles went real early. Like, if you look beyond this, there's not a lot past the 3rd round where I would have been like, okay.
It's 2 swings to make sure dumb fans don't blame them for passing on Jalen Carter.
That's true. And they want to build from the inside out.
Yes.
Okay. So I mentioned this on the Irish Bears podcast. Like, they don't usually have like big, like in Indianapolis, they didn't have big name edge rushers outside of Justin Houston for a year. Like, it was mostly guys like El-Quanine Muhammad and guys like, but they didn't have that interior rush presence last year. So El-Quanine Muhammad looked like a pedestrian.
If you're getting pressure up the middle and you have good coverage in the backfield, defensive backfield, and you got linebackers now who are known for coverage, your ends are going to get some sacks just because.
Correct.
But actually, I was going to say, I'm sorry I tried to interrupt you here, but this was all your fault anyway.
It was all my fault.
This was all your fault.
I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm very curious to hear.
Who did you want more than ever them to draft last year that they passed on? You got
Pickens.
You got your Pickens.
I got
See?
my Pickens.
So now that's why they're like, oh man, we want to go edge here, but Rob on the Hallis Huddle keeps saying we missed out on Pickens, so we're going with Pickens. This year and every year moving forward for the next nine years, for a decade solid, they're going to pick up Pickens because of you.
Foles. I love it. I love it. I'm glad I have that kind of influence at Hallis Huddle.
Man. That's right.
Maybe that's why. I'm sorry, at Hallis Huddle at Hallis Hall. See, that's how much influence it is.
That's
it's
right.
now going to be called
They're...
Hallis Huddle instead of Hallis Hall. So speaking of Zach Pickens, a very similar situation: 6'4", 291 pounds. A lot of the same traits as Gervon Dexter, 34 and 3/8 inch long arms though. Vertical wasn't quite as good, but 30.5 inches. RAS score 9.23. He was my defensive tackle number 10 on my board. A little bit about him. He's got a decent burst here. I'm going to play this. This is the Chicago Bears. Actually, they put this out. This is their highlights of him. He's got a decent burst off the ball. Definitely a high motor guy, but he's very inconsistent. I see him more as a 3 technique with a little bit of versatility to play as the 1 technique. I know we have already mentioned this. Polls calls them a hybrid interchangeable defensive tackle, and I think they're going to try to play both a lot of times.
In coverage.
Yeah. Woohoo! He did come in lighter at the combine. He was a little over 300, so I do think that he might be better at that 290 mark if he's going to be playing the 3-tech. If they want him to play the 1, he's probably going to have to put that 10, 15 pounds back on. He's got good gap control, moves down the line well to stop the run. Both him and Dexter are very good against the run, which is something they really need after watching them get killed last year at that. And when he's on, he can be a solid disruptor in the backfield. He does struggle at times in double teams, but again, he probably won't see that many if Dexter's playing next to him.
So I think I was surprised that they had not back-to-back, but 2 picks not very far apart and went DT for both. But then I thought about it and said, look, this team was historically bad at stopping the run, and all around, just the defensive line wasn't generating pressure and wasn't stopping the run. The 2 things that their whole job is basically to do. So to invest here twice, much later, they put another DT in, 7th round. So I don't know what his value will be, if any. But
I'll get to him.
I think it had to be a unit that they invested a lot in. And so I think it was a successful day 2 as well.
Yeah, so we'll end it and go to day 3. Before we do, I just want to hear, I'm not big on giving draft grades this early because we got to see the guys play. So whatever I say here is probably going to just be moot. How many times do you see like 9 teams with an A grade? Like not everybody can have an A grade in 3 years. You're going to hit on maybe 30% of your guys. So that means 3 out of 10 here are probably going to be good players. The other guys probably only play on 1 rookie deal. I think overall, I'm going to do pass fail. I give it a passing grade.
Yeah, I mean, if pass fail are only options, they're passing right now because they came in with a plan and they're executing that plan. Will it pan out and work? That's where we talk later.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go into much more depth later about that very concept.
So for now,
yeah,
bear down.
Bear down.
Part 3 next.
Part 2.
Part 2. I'm sorry. Day 3 next.